Great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the recording, just so other people can access it online. But so I'll go ahead and just start my part, and then we'll do introductions at the end. So sound good? Awesome. So I just want to welcome you guys, and I just want to tell you that I think it's my privilege to get to do this. As you know, my name's Kathy Holguin, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am licensed in California. I was licensed in Nevada, but I let my license there go because I'm no longer in Nevada. I was in Nevada for a little while. So I have a private practice in California here, and I see clients anywhere from age 6 to like 77. So like kind of the full range and spectrum. I work with trauma and grief primarily. I work a lot with anxiety and depression, and then I also have a job that I work with the military. I work at Camp Pendleton with military families. So I work with mamas and new babies. It's so fun. So I do a lot of postpartum depression sort of assessments, and I make sure our military families are doing okay. Obviously, within the military, they have their own needs and concerns. And so they hire therapists to come in and work with those families. And so I do that as well. So that's sort of a little bit about me. I have an undergraduate degree from Biola University. So I have a Christian background. And then I got my master's degree at Cal State Fullerton. So I kind of have a nice mix of education in terms of background. I do specialize working with women, and primarily women who have gone through traumatic loss, and mostly trauma and betrayal trauma, which is kind of a specialty. And then I work a lot with families that have issues regarding same-sex attraction, whether it be within the Christian community. That's obviously a loss. And so for families that have traditional values. And so I work a lot with those kinds of families as well. So I have kind of a full range. I work a lot with kids whose parents are getting divorced. I have a legal background. I was a paralegal for 25 years before I became a therapist. So I work a lot with kids that are going through those losses. So I am trained in EMDR, which is a trauma therapy, and it helps people kind of organize trauma. So that's just a little bit about me. I knew I wanted to be a therapist from the time I was 12 years old. I know that's really weird, but I wasn't encouraged to get an education. So I went, and I was told I could be a nurse, a secretary, or an airline stewardess. So that was like the full gamut of what my potential was. And so I followed God's leading and decided, no, I'm going to get an education when I went through some of my own traumatic loss. And God just was so alive and real to me. And so I'm here today doing what I do because of what God's done in my life. So I always give that testimony, because I always say I'm not a Christian therapist. I'm a therapist. I'm not a therapist who is a Christian. I'm a Christian who's a therapist. Makes sense. So, and I always tell my clients that too. I always tell my clients, my biggest marketing strategy, whether they're believers or not, is that I'm a Christian, and my marketing strategy is I just pray for God to bring to me whoever I'm supposed to see. And that's what he does. And it's been really cool to see people react to that. And my theoretical background is I really believe that the Holy Spirit does a work in each of our lives emotionally, and he does his work in his own time. And sometimes he needs to bring people, around to kind of help in that work. And so I kind of see myself as sort of an assistant to the Holy Spirit and what he's already doing in somebody's life. And as a therapist, I just get the privilege of walking alongside them because I have certain tools and training that it can assist. But I'm always asking the Holy Spirit to lead and guide me and show me what he wants to do in somebody as they walk through their healing journey. So that's a little bit about me. I want to get to know you guys and find out a little bit more about why this was something that attracted you and sort of how you think you might want to use some of this, and whether it be personal. You don't have to disclose personal information if you don't want to. We want to honor that. And we'll talk about safety and the confidentiality and stuff a little bit later. But I thought maybe I would do some introductions more toward the end as we get more people online, if that's okay. Okay. I just don't want to talk about myself and then dive in and have you guys go, wait, what about me? I want to tell you about me. So we'll do that a little more closer to the end. So just a few housekeeping things. I just wanted to encourage everyone to attend this in person. I know that typically these classes can be accessed online through YouTube. And for a lot of classes that are information only or lecture driven, I think that's awesome. This class is a little bit different in that it's very experiential, meaning that I'm going to take you through a process. I'm going to ask you to choose something that you might want to work on in terms of your own personal grief or loss, and use that as the pinpoint, the thing that you want to focus on as you're moving through this process. And so because I'm asking you to do that, it can be a very personal thing. And we want to honor everybody's safety and confidentiality, right? So I'm a therapist, so confidentiality is a big deal in my world. And so as people are sharing or talking, I'm going to be turning off some of the recording aspects of our class just to protect people's privacy. So you know that it will be, everything will be protected and it will be private. As much as I can control that. Okay. So my goal is for you guys to feel safe and to feel like you can be a little more raw, maybe more so than you normally would in this setting. And I know it's a little tricky because we're recording it. So I just want you to know I'm very mindful of that and we'll be careful. And if you can attend live like we're doing right now, I would highly, highly encourage it because you'll get the most out of the class if we can do that. And so my favorite verse is Ephesians 3, kind of 18 through like 19, 21, which is my prayer for you is that you'll not only know with your heads the height, breadth, and depth of the love of God, but that you'll experience it for yourself. And I feel like it's through the experience with ourselves and with the Lord that the Holy Spirit, as he works in our hearts and in our lives, is what transforms us. It's what motivates us to be obedient and motivates us to draw closer to him. And without that, it can be somewhat of a rote sort of relationship. And I want it to be experiential for you. And it's the same way with grief, right? Grief is a kind of an interesting subject because everybody's experience with grief and loss is completely personal and unique to them. And what might affect me as a young child might not affect somebody else, right? And so that's why it's so very personal to us. And this process basically honors our own process, our own thoughts, our own feelings. And it's in that process of honoring ourselves that we are able to enter into the grief process. I always tell people, don't ever go see a therapist that's not ever done her own work, right? And it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like if you haven't done your own work in terms of grief and loss, it's really hard to minister to other people because you don't have that same experiential knowledge and feeling. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to make this something that's very experiential to you guys. And then what I'll do at the end of each class is I'll send a homework worksheet. It's going to assign reading from the book that I talked about a little earlier when we weren't recording, the Grief Recovery Method. It's going to assign homework from this book, and then a lot of the reading is going to be like the jumping off point of the things that we're going to talk about. Okay. And you will get it emailed to you. So if anybody had trouble getting emails, I'll find out. I'll work a little bit with Kirk and make sure that everybody is getting the information that they need. Okay. So So that's a little bit, of the housekeeping part. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about the goals of this class for me, and then I'm going to ask you a little bit about what your goals are. Because I feel like your time is precious, right? All of our time is really valuable. And I don't think you'd be coming to a class like this if you didn't have a particular reason. And so I'm going to ask you about your own goals for why you're here. But for me, as the instructor, my goal for the class is that I want to teach you this method that you can use for many, many people in many different circumstances. But I want you to go through your own process for your own personal situation so that you can learn how to process it with this filter, I guess, or using this method. And as you learn to process your own grief, then, then you'll learn better how to help others. So that's kind of the thought behind it. Sometimes when we're little, we have situations in our life, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen and put my PowerPoint up here at this point. Give me just a second. I learned how to do it.
We see it, Kathy.
Yay, it worked. Okay. Okay. You guys can see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, so this is just the housekeeping piece that I just went over. Okay, I'll catch up with myself here. Okay. So I just want to talk about how we define grief in grief recovery, because really the grief recovery method defines grief differently than most programs that seminars that I've talked about or that I've learned from, and most of the stuff I've read. And I love how broad the definition is. And it's defined as the loss of a hope, dream, or expectation, right? That can be the loss of a marriage, the loss of what we hope for our children. In this day and age, it seems like a lot of our kids are adopting ways of thinking that are not traditional ways of thinking. And sometimes we can see some of the pitfalls that our kids are kind of like adopting as truth. And that can be a loss, right? A loss of an expectation. Obviously, if we have sexuality issues with our children, that can be a loss as well as a parent. And then we have obviously the loss of a spouse, of a child, loss of our health, like loss of what we thought a career might be like. So there are lots of different types of losses. Some can be really big. In trauma work, we call it big T and little t trauma, right? It can be big grief or little parts of grief or losses. And so, but they're losses nonetheless. And the thing that we want to keep in mind is that we want to honor our losses for being losses. Sometimes I'm not going to get ahead of myself. The inability to process loss, in my opinion, is kind of the foundational issue and problem when most people come into my office. And what I mean by that is that typically they've had some kind of a loss or a disappointment or a grief that was never really addressed, usually when they're young, when they're small. And so they've never had a chance to really look at what they really felt, and they really learned more how to cope rather than to hold feelings. And so grief, in my opinion, is sort of the foundational basis of where a lot of people struggle in terms of anxiety and depression and other mental health issues. So it's important to address grief, because I do believe that at the very foundation, we're dealing with grief issues. And so my goal usually is to help identify where some of those hurts and losses came from and see if we can go back and try to heal some of the things that never got healed or never got addressed, right? I came from a situation where it was like, well, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? In my situation, I was a single mom with 5 kids, and I had no education, and I had no way of really supporting my family, and dad was not going to support. And so, but the message I got from the important people in my life was, well, you just figure it out. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you just make it happen, right? So you can see in that situation, there was no room for me to like be present with myself enough to process what I was feeling, because I was just trying to survive, right? I was just trying to keep my head above water and just trying to make things happen so that I had a home for myself and all my children. So grieving came later when I had the chance to feel like the rest of the other needs were being met. And so I feel like the goal is that if we can educate people about the importance of grief, it can bring people to a healthier place in their life sooner, rather than feeling like they're isolated and alone in the process. And so if we learn to come alongside people that are grieving and that are suffering loss, then we have the ability to do some things that are reparative, as well as come alongside and help with the material things that need to happen. So, and as you learn to validate your own experiences and your own grieving experiences and losses, then you learn to validate other people's as well. It's just kind of a natural extension. And it does unlock a whole different world for you as you begin to move into that, right? A lot of times churches and Christian communities and groups, they have people coming in to these different dynamics and situations. And you have a lot of new believers and people that maybe haven't learned a lot of the same things that we've learned as more seasoned believers, right? And I always kind of like to use like the glass is too full analogy, right? So if you take this glass right here, it's full of water, and if you try to pour more into it, what's going to happen? It's going to overflow, right? Right? There's no room. So say you have new believers that come in with all their stuff, right, that they haven't sorted out yet. And you have a ministry, a grief ministry, that can help make some room in this glass, right? You can help people make emotional space so that they have more to pour in. That is the good stuff that scripture has to offer. But sometimes there's no room for that because some of this stuff has to get dealt with first, or in tandem with, right? And so if we can learn how to make more space in somebody's heart, in somebody's life, then that's what we're going to do, right? And so grief work sort of helps it clears out sort of the cobwebs and helps make some emotional space as well. And I find that within the church, that's something that is really important, because typically most of our Christian communities don't really have the ability to do that. And so you guys are really can be really important, because obviously if you have these tools, it's something that you can utilize. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my perspective as a therapist toward grief. And whether I'm working with a 6-year-old or a 70-year-old, it seems that most of the types of dynamics are very similar, meaning that something happens to us as children. We learn to have a certain perspective of life based on our experience as a child, and we carry that perspective into our adult life. Okay. So the problem is that children, when they go through situations that are hard for them to hold, they get overwhelmed with their feelings. Like, and if they get overwhelmed with their feelings, then the only alternative they have is to learn to stuff their feelings or deny how they feel or to minimize their feelings. This is very general. It's definitely like, it's not, this is how it is every single time. But for the most part, it feels like a lot of adults have learned to stuff their feelings, deny their feelings, or minimize their feelings because feelings are overwhelming. And the way I grew up, feelings were kind of the enemy, right? Feelings were not your friend. It was like, oh no, go to your room. When you feel better, you can come back out, right? But it was confusing because it's like, well, wait a minute, mom or dad can be upset and scream and cry and be, I would call it dysregulated, but children aren't allowed to do that. So it was a very confusing sort of existence. And I think a lot of people grow up in that same situation. And sometimes when children grow up that way, they learn to ignore how they feel. And so as adults, if they ignore how they feel, they sort of get stuck and they utilize the same coping mechanisms over and over and over and over again, which is to stuff, minimize, or deny, right? And then what do we do when we have our own children? We do the same thing. Stuff, minimize, and deny. I was like queen of minimizing my own children's experience as we went through our own trauma because I didn't know how to validate how I felt about what was going on, much less teach my children how to feel what they feel and to know it was safe for them to feel what they felt. So that's why grief is kind of like that subject that nobody really wants to touch, right? I was blown away that we had 35 people sign up for this class because typically therapists don't even want to do grief work because it is such a raw experience for people. And so I think that being able to recognize that you can cope with not only your feelings, but people that you're walking alongside, what you help them do is create sort of a container for them and hold their feelings and their emotions and know that it's not going to always be this way, right? That's where that hope piece comes in, right? That hope piece gets reignited. And as Christians, like it even becomes even more I guess, highlighted, right? And I want to say a little bit about as a believer. I'm very careful to, and you'll notice even today, like I didn't open in prayer, things like that, because people who are grieving and are working through grief issues, we don't know sort of where they're at spiritually in terms of their relationship with God and how they perceive God, right? Me as a single parent, I was fortunate in that I wasn't angry with God. I didn't think God had betrayed me or left me. I didn't have trust issues with God. But there are a lot of people out there that do, right? They've been disappointed either within their church background, other believers, right? And so my goal for us as people that are assisting others is to sort of get out of the way and let God do his work without trying to put him in a box, meaning that I don't have to give the perfect scripture. I don't have to say the perfect prayer. I can be present for people and I can allow the Holy Spirit to do his work in the way that he chooses to do it. And I think that's a really important distinction when you're talking to people who have a really strong faith. It's not that we're denying or minimizing the work that God can do, but we want to let him do it in his own time. And we don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of that. So if we have a preconceived, what would I want to say, agenda, I guess, for how somebody is supposed to grieve because they're a Christian, that can definitely be something that would get in the way of somebody who's trying to work through how they feel, right? We need to have a clean slate so that people feel welcomed and accepted no matter what they're feeling. Feelings are just feelings, right? They don't have to define us. They don't have to bury us. They're just what they are, but we want to welcome them. So within that context, it kind of leads us more to like the idea of active listening, right? So I've kind of given a slide here to kind of help with talking about active listening. Does anybody have any kind of like background in what it means to actively listen? No? Okay, so some of this will be new to you guys. So
Well, Kathy,
yeah.
I kind of do as a speech pathologist.
Mhm.
We worked on this a lot, just in learning our sounds and language, and especially with my children with autism, we worked on this a lot for them to listen because they had their own ideas of what to do, and they wanted to do it without listening to their teacher or any other peer. And so we talked about this a lot, and we did a lot of training on listening. This may have nothing to do with what you're going to teach.
Yes.
Yes, we called it active listening.
Yep, exactly. And I always joke around because I always say, like when I work with couples, right? I always say, because I have to teach how to listen, right? Teach people how to listen to each other. And I always say, you know, in grad school, we have to take a class just on listening for a whole year. I mean, a whole year of classes twice a week for 52 weeks, right? It is an art form to listen. It's very difficult. And I mean, to listen in the way that people feel like you're with them, right? And it's very, it takes a lot from you, right? It's a very tiring experience if you're really actively listening. So you're right, Susan, and even for you, even more so because you're listening to sounds, you're listening for other things. Right. Kind of like a therapist, like we're listening for other things that maybe aren't so obvious. So it is quite an art form. But it's amazing how when you really get good at it, how you are able to really use it to your advantage in terms of improving communication. Right.
Right. Can I ask you just a couple more things real quick?
Sure.
First of all, somebody here asked in the chat if these slides are going to be available to us.
Sure. Yep.
You'll be sending them home after every class or something?
Yeah, I can send the PowerPoint actually to you.
Okay. Yep. And then do you want us asking questions as you go through?
Yes.
Or are you going to wait until the end and have us ask questions, or how do you want to handle it?
Yeah, so I'll give a little phrase. I mean, a little break in between there. Like, it's like as soon as I get done with this portion, I was going to ask for questions. So yeah, if you guys can hold your questions, and then I'll give a little break, and then we can ask questions. Sound good? Okay, awesome. Do you guys, so what's an open-ended question? Susan, tell me what an open-ended question is.
An open-ended question is more than just a yes/no question. It's where you have to share information. In my case, my children would generate information, is what we call it.
Yes, exactly. So it's, are you sad today? Yes or no, right? That's a close-ended question, right? An open-ended question is, tell me how you're doing. What happened today, right? That's an
we would say, sorry to interrupt. We would say, you have to answer this, and you have to give me, depending on the age of the child, 8 words. Or 6 words, 5 words, because it was hard for them.
Yes.
So they have to really think, and I would count them. You'd say, how are you today? I am fine. 3 words, not enough. Got to give me some more. It's amazing how we all default to that. And it was a real good training thing. And they would count their own words eventually. Anyway, enough about that.
I love that. That's perfect. Because, you know, when people are grieving, their brains are not engaging. Okay, so there's, depending on the level of grief and how much time has gone by, but you'll even see people when they're grieving, if it's a sensitive subject, they'll actually disassociate. You'll actually see on their face where they can't answer you. They can't formulate the words to talk about a feeling. right? And that's a trauma response. So I'll teach you a little bit about trauma as we go through here, but because what happens is when the emotional part of our brain gets triggered, it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And what that means is, like, if you think of your brain kind of like my fist here, this is the frontal lobe of your brain, just here. And it's all that's responsible for your executive function. It's responsible for reasoning, and for thinking clearly. It organizes you. You can come up with a plan. You can negotiate, right? When this is working, okay? When you have a traumatic situation happen, and it happens a lot with couples if you argue, okay, or when you're arguing with your child or something, what happens is you lose the ability to think clearly. So when your heart rate, this has been empirically proved by the Gottman Institute, when your heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute, you lose the ability to think clearly. So your brain actually goes offline, like you unplugged your computer. You no longer have access to the thinking logic part of your brain. And the emotional part of your brain, which is in the back, that part of your brain takes over. Okay. This part of your brain is specifically purposed to take care of fight, flight, or freeze responses. It's trying to protect you. Okay. When we get into situations that overwhelm us, our frontal lobe goes offline, our heart rate goes up, and this part of your brain is what takes over. So the way to get this part of your brain back online and come out of that trauma response is by breathing. You have to learn how to breathe in a way that gets your heart rate down. That's why slow breathing is such a big thing right now, because there's been a lot of research that shows that as you breathe, you bring your heart rate down, your limbic system starts to process, the circulation begins to take to become more natural, and more oxygen comes to the brain, and then you're able to think clearly. Okay, that's why trauma is so closely related to grief, because if we live in a traumatic state and we're constantly being reactive because we're getting triggered all the time, then it's hard for us to come out of this traumatic response and come out and think clearly. So open-ended questions, it kind of forces the brain to engage. And with a lot of my trauma clients, like, I actually have to remind them of their appointments 2 or 3 times, even in the same week, because when you've been traumatized or you're suffering from loss or grief, your brain just is not working. People will say, oh, it feels like I'm in a fog, or it feels like I just can't think straight, right? I'm not myself. Those are a lot of the comments that you hear. And it's because the brain is just trying to survive. It's not able to problem solve or even necessarily keep a date on a calendar. So that's something that's really important for you guys to remember. There are some things to keep in mind that are very practical, right? You want to speak slowly. You want to wait for people to respond, give them time. Because, and this is something I struggle with all the time, because I talk quickly, right? And my brain is going way faster than I can even talk. So you have to, even as the person who's supporting the person who's grieving, you even have to breathe, right? Because if you're nervous about what's going on with somebody who's in a traumatic state, and you're a little like, oh, I'm not sure about this, and I'm a little nervous, it could be likely that you start getting amped up, right? Your heart starts to beat a little faster. So it's important that you take care of yourself as well. Keep breathing, and really, really be mindful that as people are coming through a traumatic experience, it's very, very difficult to concentrate. If you ask an open-ended question and they're having a hard time answering, help them out, right? So how did it go with when you met with your son yesterday and you were going to have a hard conversation, right? Maybe that's a loss that they're working on, right? And they can't answer an open-ended question. You can ask them, did it feel disappointing? Did it feel like, you can kind of help them, but be sure to use feeling words, right? The thing that we tend to do is, especially those of you who pursue education, right? We tend to get in our heads, and we tend to approach things from a cognitive perspective, right? So we're in our heads, and so we try to make sense and logic things out. And people who are grieving, they're not in their head, they're in their soul, they're in their heart. And so if they haven't been taught how to use feeling words to describe what their experience is in the here and now, you might even have to start at that basic level, right? Go online and print out a feeling word chart. In fact, I'll send you guys one, right? And it will help you be able to be mindful of, well, this person might be feeling A, B, C, or D. Let me check in with them. And when little kids have had their feelings minimized or not acknowledged, it's hard for them to come up with words to describe how they feel, because they were never taught that you have this feeling and this is the word that goes with it. Okay. I know it sounds kind of elementary, but when parents grow up and have never really had that experience within themselves, sometimes it's hard for kids to learn from parents that really haven't been able to explore their own feelings. So I have an interesting story I will share with you guys. It's a bit raw, but I will share it anyway. When I went through one of the hardest times in my own life, I recognized that I didn't actually feel what I thought I should be feeling. Meaning, if I thought happiness was supposed to be, I laugh and I look happy, then that's happiness, right? Or, and I started to pray about it, and I started to ask the Holy Spirit to teach me what it really felt like to be happy, sad, mad, whatever. Not what I thought it should feel like, but what it really felt like. Okay. So I began to pray, and I began to have dreams, and it was God answering my prayer directly. I began to have dreams that allowed me to feel feelings. It was the coolest thing. So one of them I remember is I was having a dream, and I was laughing hysterically, like to the point where I was crying in the dream. I was laughing at that deep level. And I kind of came up to a point where I was awake, but not fully awake, kind of that in-between stage. And I heard very distinctly, this is belly laughter. Right? And so I had a way of attaching what the feeling was with the words. And he began to do that in my life over and over and over again with different feeling states. One of them that I won't go into was terror. And it was the same process. I said, Lord, what other feelings do you want me to learn? Right? And I had a dream, came up. I was not quite awake yet, and it was terror. This is terror. And it was so amazing, because as that integration started to happen between what I knew was a feeling, I had the word for it, and I could integrate the two. Okay. That's what children are supposed to be able to do when they're little. Johnny falls off of the bike and runs to mama. Mama holds him, comforts him. Oh, you're so sad because you fell off your bike. I'm sad, Mom. Right? He knows what sad is because he's linked it with a feeling that was attached to that experience. He becomes comfortable with feeling sad. Okay. That's just a very small example, right? Terror is the same way, right? There's a big giant wave coming to eat you alive, and you've got a 4-year-old who's like terrified. Okay. Oh, sweetie, that was so terrifying for you. It was, Mom, it was terrifying. They know, okay, that feeling is terrified, right? So we have to be able to help people name how they feel and not allow them to stay in their head and have it be a cognitive process only. Part of it is cognitive, but it is really more emotional. And as you connect the cognitive piece with the emotional piece, that's what we call being integrated. And that's the goal, is to become integrated. Because the more we can integrate our head and our heart, the more we're equipped to deal with the things that grieve us. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to stop for questions in a minute, but I'm going to just get through the rest of this active listening, just some little tips for you. Okay. Learn to paraphrase and summarize what other people are saying so that you fully understand. Because when we listen, we can't help it. We hear things through the filter of our own life and our own experience and our own culture, our own background, where we live. Like everything gets filtered through that because it's part of who we are. So it's really important to clarify what somebody is saying to you and ask them, do I understand? Did I get that? Yeah. You don't try to fix it. You just listen. But part of that listening is being able to paraphrase and summarize without having an agenda about how you're going to respond in return, which is part of the hard part. Practicing non-judgmental listening, setting aside your own bias and your own point of view, right? Keep in mind that when you're with somebody who's grieving, this isn't necessarily, it's not a reciprocal two-way conversation, because this person is probably not capable of having a two-way conversation the way you're normally used to having with somebody. Right? So trying not to, they're already judging themselves because they're already putting themselves through a pace that is probably harder on themselves than anybody else expects it to be. That's the thing I've really noticed with people that are grieving too. They have such high expectations for themselves that it's very hard for them to let themselves grieve in their own time and have it look the way it always needs to look. What I hear a lot is that, oh, my kids think I should be over it, or it's been 3 years, and so why can't I just move on, right? A lot of self-judgment, a lot of of their own sort of, I guess, just self-judgment comes up. Like you hear that a lot over and over again. And so giving them permission to let their experience be theirs and theirs alone is really important, because they will be harder on themselves. And demonstrate patience by focusing on the other person instead of on your own thoughts. And it's a lot easier said than done, for sure. And then positive nonverbal communication, like eye contact, leaning in when someone's talking to you, tracking with them. That's all really important. This day and age, obviously, our phones are always on and always present. So put the phone away. Even if it gets like just now, my phone just went off, right? So you just want to be careful not to be distracted. So that's basically kind of the 6 sort of active listening tips. And I'm sure there are a lot more, but just the ones that I sort of came up with. Okay, questions. Who has a question?
I have one. I don't know if you'll cover this maybe later on in later classes, but I have a guy that does come to me, and he goes through a lot of things. And at the end of our conversation, I feel drained, like I went through it. And while he's telling me what he's going through, I do actually feel those emotions myself. Is there something that we can do to maybe help ourselves, that we're not drained at the end of that, or to help ourselves in the counseling of other people?
That's a great question. Yes. Yeah, that's the trick, right? So it is. And there, I don't think there's any pat answer for that. One of the pat answers is self-care, right? Making sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're getting what you need so that you have the emotional energy to walk somebody else's path with them. You have to know your own body, right? If you start getting activated and you start really getting in the trench with them, if there's a way to help you remember that it's not necessarily as helpful to them because you're in the hole with them and there's no one to pull them up, right? Yes, I hear lots of devastating things all the time and every day. And I have to constantly remind myself that if I feel the depth of sorrow and helplessness and hopelessness that they feel, I'm no help to them. And so I have to draw on like my own strength and my own experiences, because I'm on the other side of some of that, that I can instill hope and I can give encouragement and I can actually be that rock that they need at the time. So self-care is a really important piece when you're walking alongside people, because you have to be able to take care of yourself and to be whole and healthy before you can help anybody else. I know. And if you're really empathetic, like if you're a really empathetic person naturally, then it can be a blessing and a curse, right? God made you that way for a reason, right? And so that's something that we need to celebrate, but it's also something that you need to really pay attention to. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps very much. Thank you.
Yeah. And also I think too, paying attention to what's going on in your own body, right? So if you say you have 3 people in a row that you're seeing, and that third person, you can start to feel your chest get tight, and you can start to feel like you start getting a little foggy, right? Like whatever it is in your body that happens that gives you an indicator, hey, we need a break here. Right? Because we're mind, body, soul, and spirit. So we're integrated. It's not like we can just motor through and not pay attention to those parts. So you might need to go for a walk. You might need to do some deep breathing. You might need to ground yourself, do something intentional for yourself so that you can have what you need. I have to do that all the time. So you do running in place, deep knee bends, whatever, just to get your body grounded so that you can get some more oxygen going to your brain. Because it is possible that you're getting activated, and maybe some of that whatever's going on in your life could be a little bit more traumatizing in some ways. I don't mean traumatizing in that it's laying you out like and you're not effective, but it can trigger you for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Is there any in the chat, Susan?
No, I asked you that one about the PowerPoint, if you're going to send it home. That was the question. I
Okay.
do have a question.
Sure.
I was trying to take some notes as you were talking. And so I understand very clearly about how to have a child to explain their feelings, like you were talking about the wave or falling off the bike, for a child to do that. But how do you do that with an adult, for instance? And I wrote what you said about you were helping others to create a container to put their feelings in. So
Mhm.
like, for instance, this afternoon, a friend from church stopped by. Her husband passed away 3 or 4 years ago. We were having a Super Bowl party at our house, and I said, "Are you going to come?" And she said, "Oh no, I couldn't come." And she just started crying. And I said, "What?" And she said, "It'll all be couples. And I don't go to places where there's couples." And I said, "But it won't be all couples. I'm thinking it'll mainly be guys." But she just started crying. So how do I handle that? I mean, that would have been one thing if it was a small child, but how do you handle it with another adult?
Right.
Can you give an example, kind of?
Yeah. So I think it's natural to want to kind of talk them into making a different decision, right? Because that was probably a natural desire was, oh no, if she comes, then she'll feel better. And like try to like reason with her, I guess, right? Oh no, it
Yeah,
won't be.
I just didn't say anything. I just held her and
Yeah.
let her cry.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'd like to know how to help her work through that. I tried to get her to come, but she wouldn't come to this.
right.
So go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and honestly, that's the best thing to do. Hold her and let her cry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
If
for
you
an
can-
adult, it's somewhat different then.
yes, because, well, that's partly why I shared with you about children, because most adults, believe it or not, especially like our age and older, right? Most adults don't know how to talk about how they feel. So they revert back to a very young place in them that that's their only way of letting out a feeling is to cry, right? That's a very young sort of thing to do. It's not that adults don't cry, but if she's
Right.
crying because that's her only way of expressing how she feels, then you can tell that, yeah, she's in a really young state in terms of her ability to grieve, right? That's why people get stuck in their grief. And that's why grief recovery method is so good, because it helps people get unstuck, right?
Okay.
And
Great.
so if you can conceptualize that experience from kind of a therapeutic standpoint, in that, wait, she's reacting in a very reasonable way, but if it's preventing her from living her life and being able to be with other people, being able to, right, if it's stifling her, then there's something else going on. And it's because she's coping in a way that is from a much younger perspective. So the goal is to help give her language to be able to process how she's feeling. So maybe as she's crying, you ask her, how old do you feel right now? I feel like I'm 3, right? And that gives you the idea that's, oh, okay. So she wasn't given the tools, like the little kid who fell off his bike and said, I'm so sad, I'm so mad, right? Because there's no language for it. Depending, and now you have to also take into consideration, it kind of depends too on how far away is she from the grief? How far away is she from the loss? Like has it been a month? Has it been 6 months? Has it been 2 years? Right?
3 or 4 years.
Yes. See, so she's stuck, right? Okay.
Well, and she's also perhaps of a generation, she's probably 10 to 15 years older than me,
Yes.
of a generation where you did not get counseling
Right.
and you did stuff it down like you talked about earlier, and you don't talk about it.
Exactly.
So
Right.
would it have been better for me to just hold her for a little bit and then just say something like, so what I'm hearing you say is that you feel really lonely,
Mhm.
or I don't know, some of those other words you're going to send me on the feeling chart,
Yes.
something
Exactly.
like that. So help her to be able
Yeah.
to share more, because she just shut down then and wanted to leave.
Yep. Right. Because her frontal lobe went offline. She couldn't talk anymore. She couldn't reason
Right.
anymore because she got activated, right? This part kicked in. Oh, we're in trouble here because we're too sad. And if we're too sad, then we get overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed, we might not survive. See, that's
Right.
coming from a very young childlike perspective, which honestly, I think most of us have either been there or are there. And you're right. My mother, I just lost my dad 2 years ago. So my mother is there. She literally has a difficult time going anywhere that's unfamiliar because her panic just is off the charts, and she goes into trauma, which comes from a very young place that's never been addressed. But
Wow.
the key is that it stifles you to the point where you're bound and there's no freedom in your life to be who God created you to be and intends for you to be. And that's the conversation I have with my mom all the time. You know, I'm like, you know what, but mom, you're here. God still has something for you to do, right? There's not an accident that you're here. And you have your grandchildren, you have, you know, you have the people that in your life that love you and that you want to love back, right? So, but she is not able or willing. There's a big difference, big distinction. Some people are not able and some people are unwilling. And if that's the case, we want to honor that. You know, we don't judge them, right? They've implemented a certain way of coping in their life, in my mother's case, for 83 years. It's not likely that's going to change, right? So, and that's okay. That's really okay. But if it's somebody that is willing and just doesn't have the tools and is able, then we want to go ahead and give them the tools while we walk alongside them.
All right, thank you. That was
Mhm.
great. Thanks.
Mhm. Right.
Miss
That's why,
Kathy,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I have a question right along those lines. If you do have someone who's an adult and say they've been, I guess, emotionally stifled as a child, whether they're a friend or a family member, and I guess you're not really supposed to treat them anyways, but
Yeah.
or whether they're someone who's coming into your counseling office, are there exercises that you can do?
Sorry, you cut out there. Exercises that you can do. I lost you.
Her mute.
Can you hear me?
There
Can
you
you hear
No,
me?
you just came back.
Sorry,
That's okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
No, I was saying, are there exercises that you can do with adults that will help them to, I guess, increase their emotional range, or, because obviously they didn't get what they needed as a child. I mean, I don't know if that book that we're getting as our textbook are there exercises in there, or is there something that you can do, some type of exercise you can do with them that will help them to be able to vocalize how they're feeling?
Yeah. So what I do as a therapist is I do visualizations with people. Meaning, I know that sounds kind of wooey wooey. It's not weird. Basically, what I do is I help them to relax. So I do some deep breathing. A lot of people don't even know how to relax. Like they don't even know how to relax their brain enough to let other stuff come in because they're always in survival mode, trying to figure stuff out, right? So if you can get them to relax, you can do a visualization where they are in a place that feels really safe for them. Okay. Maybe they're in their bedroom, maybe they're on a beach or in the mountains, right? And then I just ask them to tell me if they were to like talk to one of their feelings, which feeling do they think is there with them right then and there, right? And they'll usually say panic or hurt or anger, right? And I'll say, okay, if it's panic, look at panic, tell me like, how old do you think she is? Right? Oh, wow, she's 4. It's amazing. They'll know and they will. And so what I do is I have them in a very comfortable setting in where they feel safe. I ask them to talk to me about what does panic have to tell you? Oh, she was so worried when mom and dad got in a fight and mom left the house, and right. So it begins to unlock some of the feelings and it allows some integration to happen. Because what's happening is there's a very young part of them that doesn't feel comfortable sort of surfacing, I guess is the best way to put it. And when you can get the person to feel comfortable enough with that feeling that they'll actually dialogue with themselves about it, integration happens. Like they don't feel so threatened next time panic is there. Does that make sense?
That makes great sense. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm. It's a therapist therapy. It's called internal family systems. It's called IFS therapy. It's an actual therapy that I use a lot with trauma, because, you know, when we're little, if you think about it, when we're little and something happens, we feel so much more threatened and we get more reactive, because we're too little, right? But if I'm 48 but when panic hits, I still feel like I'm 5. That's why I said to Susan, well, ask her how old she feels. Right? Because all it is that little part of her is kind of knocking on her door going, hey, we're in trouble here. Well, yeah, you might have been in trouble when you were 4, but you're not in trouble at 48. Does that make sense? So what you want to do is you want to help that little one lovingly and gently to feel safe enough to say, oh, so I don't have to do such a big job. You got this? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And that's what happens in therapy. And it isn't rocket science. It's just a way of helping integrate the parts that are feeling wounded or feeling cut off to be part of the show. I kind of look at it, I kind of think about it like, I describe it this way. So think about if you're in a car and you're in the driver's seat and you have different parts of yourself named, and they're named panic, depression, anxiety, and anger. Okay. And they're all like those little parts of yourself. They're all like little kids. And they're sitting in the front seat. They're jumping up and down. You might have a station wagon and they're jumping from the 3rd seat to the 1st seat. They're kicking your seat, right? They're being annoying, right? They're just trying to get your attention. That's all they're trying to do. And they want you to say, nope, I got this. We're good. Everybody needs to get in the seat, put your seatbelt on, and I got this. We're all okay. That's all those parts of you are trying to know, is that we're okay. Because we might not have felt okay when we were 4. That's why I talk about children, and I talk to you and I start and I open with what I opened with, because you guys as grief specialists, you need to conceptualize people from when they were young till now, because my experience is that when people come in and they're 68 years old and they're grieving because they lost their 40-year-old, you know, their partner they've been with for 40 years. I'm sorry, I'm from California. Their husband or wife, not their partner. I hate that word. Okay, so sorry. But you know, all this other stuff comes up, right? You think they're coming in because they want to process the grief and the loss, but there are things that are kind of need to get in order first before they have access to being able to do that. Make sense?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
More questions? Okay. So we are done. I forgot. Are we done at 7? Well, my time 7, 9 your time? Yeah, I think we are. Okay. So we have about 15 minutes, and I wanted to get to know you guys, but we only have 15 minutes. So can we table that and do it next week? Yeah, is that okay? Because I have something
Yes.
I want you guys to do, okay? Get a piece of paper and a pencil out. Okay? Everybody ready?
Yes.
So I want you to listen to me, and I want you to do what I tell you to do, okay? Start at the top middle piece of your paper, and I want you to draw a diagonal line to the right corner of your paper. Then I want you to draw a line across the bottom of the paper, and then draw another line back up to the top of your paper where you started. Can you show me what you got? Okay. Ace, what do you got? Let me see. Come on, don't be
Do I
shy.
Was
have to
that
show
wrong?
it? I might have got
Yes.
it wrong.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Let me
Oops.
see.
Let's see. I won't show on my thing
Oh, come
for some
on.
reason. Here,
I can't see
it's
it.
not showing. Yeah, it's not showing. It's like an L,
Okay.
but an upside down L.
Upside down L. Okay, what do you got, Brenda? Oh, you're muted. Can you show it?
Mine is an X.
Okay, can we see it?
Hold on, I'm doing the marker. I'm putting it on a marker so you can see it.
Okay, good.
So hold on. Now can you see it?
Yep, I saw it. Okay, did you guys see it?
That is right. Diagonal is like that. I was right.
Okay,
If I followed instructions, I think I did it.
okay. No, you guys are doing great. Okay. Keep going. Oh, wait, I lost you guys. Hold on. Cheryl, what do you got? These are all the brave souls that are on video here. Okay. So, can you guys see everybody had something different? Yeah?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that did it wrong. I didn't draw a diagonal.
Okay. Okay, this is what I told you guys to draw. Can you see me?
Oh, a triangle.
See anything?
I have a triangle, but it's a half.
What?
Maybe unshare. Hey, Kathy, unshare your screen because it's just a black screen.
Why we
Okay.
can't see?
Hold on, hold on.
All
hold on.
right.
Oh, man, now you're testing me. Oh, just a second. I don't know how to unshare it. Ah, there
There
we
you
go.
go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
There you go.
But what was the image supposed to look like?
Let us see it again.
Can you see it?
No.
Hold on.
It's a triangle.
It's a triangle.
Mm.
Okay.
Maybe an equilateral triangle?
Can you pull it back
No.
away from the camera? Oh, okay, okay.
Can you see it?
Yeah, how did those directions make that?
Okay, therein lies the question, okay? The point, this is really fun to do if you're ever teaching a couples class, you have the couples sit back to back and you do the same thing and it's hysterical because everybody hears something different, right?
Can we see the directions?
Yes, they're in the slide.
Okay,
They're in the slides that I'm going to send you guys.
okay.
You'll see them. So the idea is that we all hear things, you know, with our own perspective, right? And that's why it's so important to ask for clarification. You know, I thought this is what you said. Is that what you mean? Right? So this is funny. Everybody gets it wrong. And that's the way it's supposed to be. I actually taught one class one time when I had 6 people in my class and they all got it right. And I just about fell off my chair. I could not believe it. A bunch of Marines, no doubt. But anyway. So anyway, it's just a fun exercise because it kind of just shows us that we all hear something different, right? And you guys will look at the directions and see what I told you to do, right? And it's going to seem so obvious to you now, right? But this is why communication and listening is so important, because as hard as we try, we cannot catch everything, and we do the best we can and we give ourselves grace. Okay. So this is really difficult work, and I applaud you for being, brave enough to learn about this. And I hope this has been worth your time, because it's just so fun for me to teach it. So, so blessings to you guys. I don't have anything else unless you guys have something. Nothing? Nobody?
I have something to
Yeah.
say, and I'm sorry that my camera's not on. It's been a long, long day. But I wanted to tell you, Kathy, that this is a great class. I'm so glad that I'm a part of it. I'm auditing the class, but I learned so much in just this time that we've had together tonight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I was thinking that, wow, you must be a really great therapist.
Well, I do my best. I love what I do and it's a calling for sure. So yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a privilege for me, you guys. Thank you, Linda. I was so nervous. You can ask Susan. I was like, I don't know if I could do this. But you guys have been very gracious and I thank you for that. So and I will be sensitive about recording things. My story is out there. I've told my story a lot in lots of public settings, so I don't worry about sharing my stuff. So I recorded the whole thing. But if you guys decide that you're going to share something, and as you go through the homework and it becomes a little more personal, give us a heads up. Say, hey, you know what? This is personal. Let's turn the recording off. And I can do that in a millisecond. So, because I don't want you guys to want to hold back, because, you know, it's going to be out there on the internet somewhere, which I totally understand. So, but do your work, really spend some time. Don't rush through it. Please don't read ahead in the book. Just do the chapters that are assigned and don't rush this process. Give yourself, honor yourself and honor your own process and your own feelings. Things will come up, I promise you. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. So, and you'll get to know me a lot better, unfortunately, if you want to or not. Because I have to share my own grief experience. Otherwise, you know, this is just a rote experience and that's not what I want for you guys. So I'm very transparent. So, okay,
Well,
guys.
Kathy,
Yes.
Kathy, real quick, in the
Mhm.
very beginning, I said that about the prices and stuff. I went back on Amazon and the paperback book is $10.99. So it's
Okay.
really a better deal. The other one is $7.95 at the website,
Okay.
but I'm not sure how long that takes to get that
Right.
I mean, how long you'll get it. Where Amazon, you know, you'll get it in a day or two. So
Yes. Yes.
just
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
the
That's a great.
paperback is $10.99. Yeah.
Yes,
So
and this
it's
process will go fast. I mean, once you're in it with yourself and we're in here for 10 weeks, you'll notice that you'll go fast. And think about, as you're reading, think about, I'm glad you said that, because I want you to think about a loss that you've had that maybe it might not even be in your conscious memory yet, but if it starts coming up, if you start having a dream, if the Holy Spirit begins to prod you, like pay attention to that, because maybe that's the issue that you need to process. We're all going to pick one of our losses and we're going to focus on processing one of our losses. One, and we're all older, so out of probably many, but pick one, because you're gonna surround this whole work around that one loss. So it's important for you to do that so that you know how to take other people through the process. Okay.
Also, real quick, can you stay on after everybody leaves?
Mhm.
And I just wanted to shout out to Linda Colbert there. She's a close friend of mine. Hi, Linda. Miss you.
Hey, Susan, it's so good to see you.
You too. Be sure and have that camera working next week, girlfriend. I want to see yourself.
Okay.
All
Awesome.
right.
Well, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, good
Thank
night,
you very much.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Have a good
It's
day.
been so good. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Bye.
Bye.
So,
So I was just going to say, if others, I don't know what happened to all the people. So they'll probably come next time,
yeah.
or they may be asking Kirk, is it too late for me to come?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, let me stop
What
the
is-
recording. Hold on. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Ah. Hold on, my picture is in the way here.
Yeah, that's okay.